What's up, everybody? This is Chris Sarabria, another edition of the Car Concierge Show, the show that helps with the buying, selling, maintaining, and repairing of your vehicle. On today's show, we're going to check out a heartwarming moment where a young bus driver lady decided she's going to stop her bus because she saw a baby walking out in the street unprotected or unguarded. After that, we're going to head over to South Carolina and talk about how a car wash is about to get paid off by the city in Columbia. And after that, we're going to really quickly talk about the fact that Tesla is under another federal probe. Yes, another federal probe for the autonomousness of its Tesla vehicles. All right, let's jump into it. So this first little video, we're talking about a situation where a young bus driver lady decided she's going to stop her bus because she saw a young child in the street. Let's check this story out really quickly.
It was an unscheduled stop on this bus route, but a necessary one. Driver Barbara Baker spotted a child walking alone down a street in Tampa, Florida, and knew she couldn't just keep driving.
And I looked again, I seen no shoes, I seen pajamas. I said, oh my God, that's a baby. My heart just dropped. And that's what just made me jump off the bus. Because I'm like, oh no.
Baker says the child seemed physically fine, but was obviously lost.
And I just walked up and down the sidewalk, asking him, house. So he pointed one way. And then I said, house again. He pointed another way. I said, okay, he don't know which way. I know he's little, but I was just trying him.
Baker held the child close and called police. The baby was eventually reunited with his family. And this bus driver is being hailed a hero for helping everyone get home safely, even if they're not a passenger on her bus. For Inside Edition Digital, I'm Mara Montalbano.
Real heartwarming story. Just a situation where kind of what we want to happen when these things happen, when a child is out in the street and they're not being supervised, and there's situations where, there's danger for that child being in the middle of the street and everything like that. So, it's these unsung heroes like bus drivers. I always say that bus drivers, definitely school bus drivers in particular, are some of the most unsung heroes. Even where I'm from, a good percentage of the young ladies that I grew up with became school bus drivers. And I think it's a perfect position for young mothers who, have children that are school age, and it allows them to, be working in a position that, of course, starts when their child leaves for school and ends when their child gets off from school. So it's very convenient. There's a lot of young ladies that I grew up with that did it, and of course, in this situation, it seemed that this young lady was like a metro bus driver. It didn't look like a school bus situation, but of course, it's just one of those situations where I talk about how, the nurturingness of women and just people in general has to come out when they see situations like this, when there's children just walking down on the street and there's nobody around, and there's danger in these type of situations. And for her to do that, even in the world we live in, because of course, if she didn't do that, we wouldn't be surprised. And that's probably the biggest problem, is that, the fact that this is not a normality like it used to be. This is something that is unusual because, these days, a lot of people, I want to say that that particular young lady, Miss Baker, was probably of a certain age, and we can understand that, or we can think that there are certain people probably younger than her that don't feel the same way, that wouldn't react in the same way. And that's why we have to make sure that, in certain positions, school bus drivers in general, you have to have people in those positions that care about other people, because they have other people's lives in their hands. That's, I always talk about how, depending on where I'm going, I don't have a problem with riding buses. I grew up riding buses all over my Midwest town, and getting from one side of the city to the other, or whatever it may be. Buses was the way to go. It felt safe. it felt like you were getting to wherever you were going in a timely manner. And of course, when you were doing that, you were putting your life in the person who's driving the bus's hands. So, any situations where you see situations where bus drivers are drunk or cause accidents that people die, those are the things I probably Stanley do report on those, because it's just horrible situations where, you know, we just have to make sure that if we can, if we're hiring for these type of positions, that if you can allow it. And of course, this is a situation where people have to be upfront about who they are, which is not a standard thing. But you want to try your best to put people in these positions that have a desire to take care of others, if that makes sense. Desire or understanding that they have others, other people's lives and situations in their hands when they're driving around on these buses. And if you're doing a job like that and you're just doing it because it's a job, and of course that's standard, and I'm not discrediting that as the ultimate motivation for you to have the job. But what I will say is that if you're in a position like that, driving school buses for children, or even the metro bus for adults getting back and forth to work, you have people's lives who have families and who have other things going on in your hands, and you just have to be extremely mindful of that. So shout out to Ms. Baker for stepping up and taking care of this young child while they was walking the streets. There's always going to be that ultimate question on why the child was in the street, where the parents were, what was going on with the authoritative figure for this child. But we're going to leave that alone for now. We're just going to bask in the happiness that Miss Baker did a great thing. Okay? All right, so next up, we're going to talk about a story happening over in South Carolina where a car wash owner has been fighting with the city for quite some time, and ultimately he won, and they got to cough up some decent amount of bread. Let's check it out.
The city of Columbia to pay $5.5 million to a former car wash owner.
The owner of Constant Car Wash has been in a 4-year battle with the city to prove he was forced to shut down his business due to the city's actions. Arlena Allen spoke with the car wash owner and his attorneys about the judgment. Selena, what is their reaction?
Well, the owner of Constance Car Wash says he's been sounding the alarm, advocating for his business for years. Now he says the new ruling means his voice is finally being heard.
The sign here is the original sign from 1949.
Chip Smith, former owner of Constant Car Wash, remembers it as a family jewel. The car wash on Gervais Street in Five Points operated for 75 years.
So we had 2 full-service car washes on this piece of property side by side, and the cashier was in the middle, in between them.
But the business would often face frequent flooding issues, which is why Smith decided to build a wall in front of the car wash to stop it. But according to a lawsuit in 2021, the city of Columbia demolished the wall, saying they owned the land that the wall was built on. The city also stated the wall was creating a safety hazard for motorists on Gervais Street. After the wall was demolished, Constant Car Wash was damaged by flooding, forcing Smith to shut it down.
And that really was the death knell for our business.
Now a judge's ruling the city wrongfully took down the wall. According to Smith's attorney, Dick Harpootlian, he was able to prove Smith owned the land through a lease agreement he had with Norfolk Southern Railway Company. He also says appraisers estimated that the value of the property before the wall was demolished was $4.6 million. But after the wall was demolished, they say the property was worth only $400,000.
It was a member of the family. It was how the family made a living, but also it connected them with the community in a number of different ways. And that will never happen again.
Now, Harpootlian says that within 10 days, they will submit their attorney fees, which will add an additional $750,000 to $1 million to the judgment. The city has 20 days to pay, or the 11.5% interest will begin to accrue. I did reach out to the city. They declined to make a statement, but said their lawyers are reviewing the court order.
Wow, the city of Columbia got to be sick about that. And of course, I mean, you can't just be going around tearing down people's walls without understanding that you have the right to do it. And I feel for the young gentleman. It seems like he had a good business. I would say that car washes are almost a thing of the past, as it were. But to set up a wall to keep his car wash from all of the flood, and obviously we saw the flood and that was happening in that little small area. It's probably a bad location depending on the season and the how much rain you get. But the wall seemed like it would have done a lot to help his business, and for the city to tear it down, they just made a mistake. They thought they had power that they did not, obviously, and they have been found liable. And I was reading another article where it says, of course, it's going up to $6 million because of court fees and attorney fees and all of that nature. But they've already been, it's already been adjudicated, and this man has already won his money. I highly doubt he's going to build another car wash. He's just going to enjoy his $6 million less his attorney fees. But it's just one of those things where we understand, or we have to understand, that we do have the ability to fight back against the cities and the states and the government. They are not all powerful. They do make mistakes. They do things that they do not have the power to do. And I always have these conversations on people talking about the government, and the government is doing this and the government is doing that, and I say, well, what are you doing to fight against that? What are you doing to stop the government from doing this and doing that? And they just like, oh, I can't do anything because it's the government. Obviously, it's been proven time and time again that that's not true. Time and time again, it's been proven that that is not true, and you just have to continue to stand up for yourself, just like this gentleman did. I mean, it was a long 4 or 5 year fight, but of course it seems like he got a fairly decent lawyer who understands the ramifications of land ownership and property lines and all these things that you have to be aware of when you are in these type of disputes where property lines are extremely important. So it's great that this man had it set up where he was an owner of the area that he put this, fence or wall up on. It seemed like a great idea, and why? I mean, we have to come to some understanding or figure out why the city of Columbia decided to tear this wall down. Did it have a good standing to do it? Did it was just a blight to the area? They said that it was dangerous to the motor vehicles on that road. I don't see how if a motor vehicle was to hit that wall where it stood, then it would have been pretty much their fault because it's not on the roadway. So it seemed like just one of those concrete barriers that you steadily see all over the place on highways and roads everywhere. So it doesn't make a lot of sense why Columbia decided that it was going to tear it down, and we have to understand that they're going to have to extremely suffer the consequences of their actions and pay this gentleman upwards of $6 million. And I've already seen that they've started to fight against this process or fight against the idea that they have to pay this man all of this money. But like the young lady said, after a while it's going to start accruing interest. And it's already being adjudicated that he's going to get this money, so he's going to get that money. All right, guys, so quick show. Last but not least, we're going to talk about Tesla, like we fairly do a lot. And Tesla is up against some federal probes, specifically about its autonomous vehicles again. Running lights, crashes, and of course, them denying these facts. So let's check out a quick story about that.
Tesla's full self-driving system is facing yet another federal investigation. This time, it's over dozens of incidents where Teslas ran red lights and swerved into wrong lanes. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration says the cars made dangerous moves while in full self-driving mode. Tesla says despite the name, the system can't drive a car by itself. Several of the complaints focus on incidents in the Bay Area. A driver in Redwood City reported their Tesla swerved into oncoming traffic not once, but twice. But the driver was able to avoid a crash.
I mean, my whole thing, this is funny, and it's going to be really quickly because I talk about this a lot. I talk about the your inability to control an autonomous vehicle in certain situations. I talk about that TV show Upload, where they had the situation where the man was creating downloadable system for people who pass away, and he was in an autonomous vehicle, and a third party made that autonomous vehicle run into something else, pretty much killing the guy. And this is ultimately our biggest Skynet fears of not having the control of the vehicles that we're driving, because of course our vehicles that we drive are very important and very deadly, to the point where people die all the time from just driving in regular cars. But now we're talking about cars that we're going to put a certain amount of trust in to drive us around with us not touching anything and not being engaged in the drivability of the vehicle. And this is what's going to happen is we just got a lot of people out there who are not like these people who they just talked about, who was able to stop these cars from swerving into ongoing traffic, or any other one of these situations where we see these autonomous vehicles do things that could cause bodily harm to the person in the car or somebody around the vehicle as well. With all of the autonomous taxi service out there, the Waymos, which of course Waymo's autonomous taxi services in Jaguar SUVs, which it's going to be a whole different story in itself. All of these system cars have their problems, and we're seeing all kinds of situations where not only these autonomous Tesla vehicles, but even the Waymo vehicles are running lights, getting pulled over for speeding, making turns that they shouldn't, impeding traffic. And this is going to continue, and I always say that we haven't gotten to the point when it comes to EV vehicles and the autonomous world, when it comes to EV vehicles, to just let it go on in a way that without a lot of oversight, because it's just a situation that we're asking for computers to kill us, is the way I see it. I mean, I think that all of these, and I think that it is the case for Waymo. I'm not sure, but we did notice that in one of the stories that we did, Waymo's computer system, after it was pulled over by a police officer, the police officer was talking to somebody who was pretty much on the other line of the system. So that gives us a kind of idea, or desired idea, that these vehicles are being monitored by human beings from some other location. And I think that kind of oversight is going to be pretty necessary when it comes to these autonomous, robo-taxi situations. But when it comes to people's personal vehicles who have autonomous features, and they're using them just to drive around, and they're doing their studies or doing work while their vehicle is driving around, these are the type of situations where we get into a problem where, you're spending way too much time relying on this autonomous system to do exactly what it does, when there's so many ways that it could fail. The camera could fail. The cruise control systems that create the drivability of the vehicle to go a certain speed can fail. These cars are still fairly brand new, and specifically as we get down the line in years, as long as more time passes that these vehicles are on the road, then you're going to get your standard wear and tear on these systems. And once these systems start to have this standard wear and tear, that's when we're really going to see that these autonomous systems have their faults, because we're talking about so many electronic pieces, so many parts, and necessary cameras and views and all these other things for these autonomous cars to move around correctly. And even for one of these systems to fail, it could be catastrophic for a person that's in that vehicle and relying on that vehicle to drive them around without them doing anything. It's a horrible situation, and I really think that it has to be definitely studied and definitely put out there for a lot of new vehicle owners that have these autonomous vehicles. When you purchase an autonomous vehicle, there has to be some guidelines put on you, or put on your ability to use these autonomous systems. It's I almost want to say that you know, when it comes to autonomous systems and people just letting their cars drive them around, these cars have to make sure that the person is paying attention, because that's what only, you know, and these are only, there's probably a lot more cases where, you know, people were using their vehicles that had these autonomous features driving around and there was accidents in them and people didn't want to report them, or, you know, they just got it fixed right away or anything like that. But we have to understand that, you know, these autonomous vehicles are going to have their problems because how fresh they are in the market and how fresh they are on our roads. And if we do not have some kind of idea, I would say, you know, if you have autonomous vehicle, a lot of these vehicles even have systems where if your eyes are not on the road, it can tell you. They have cameras in the car that look at you, and if your eyes are not looking straight forward at the road, then it will set off some kind of warnings. And I think that should probably be a standard in these autonomous vehicles, because you do not, and I do not believe that you want or desire to be in these vehicles when, or you don't want to not be paying attention. That's what I'm saying. These autonomous vehicles, you just do not want to not be paying attention. I think that you should, even in an autonomous vehicle, just like any regular vehicle, you should have to be paying attention when you're driving. And, you know, we will see, this lawsuit tells us that these autonomous systems do things when you're not paying attention that could cause bodily harm for you and the people around you. And we have to monitor this and have to make sure that people who have these vehicles are paying attention, and even down the road, because of course these cars are going to eventually become used cars, people are going to offload them for better cars, and then that's when it's really going to be important that we pay attention to these autonomous systems. Because once they're an older model vehicle, we can just standardly expect that these systems are going to have wear and tear and they're going to fail, and that's when the job is really going to start. Alright guys, I'm going to let y'all go and get up out of here. I am Chris Surratt. Please, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Car Concierge Show. Please hit me with the likes, share, subscribe, hit me in DMs if you have any questions, and I'm out. Peace.